Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another how-to video. I'm recording this on May 29th, 2015. In this chapter, we are working on setting up a reproducible build for our tab project. In the last episode, we got our tools installed, and you should have gotten an editor, which in our case I'm using WebStorm, Node.js, Git, and a command prompt. And you should have also set up an empty directory to host your project and open that in your editor. And again, here we're using WebStorm. Now that we have our development environment sort of basically prepared, what we need to do in order to have a reproducible build is we have to have a way to share our code with everybody else. And the way you do that in a professional environment is with version control. There are many version control tools out there. Right now, one of the most popular is called Git, G-I-T. And on your command line, if you type git-version, you should see the Git version something come up if you have Git installed. You may have a different version than I am, and they're very compatible with each other, so it shouldn't be a problem if you have a different version installed. Now, in addition to being a way of sharing files with your teammates, version control is also a way of basically checkpointing your work. What you can do with version control is say every so often, take everything you've done and do what's called committing or checking in your code. And when you do that, you're telling the version control system, you're telling Git, take everything I've done to this point and save it so that I can come back to it later. And as you develop using a tool like Git, you will often check in every 10 minutes or so. So as you develop, if you find yourself getting into a place where things are just broken and you don't know why and you don't know how to fix it, you can go back to your Git, you can go back to your version control and take out one of those old versions and go back to working from there. You can also, if you find a bug, go back and forth between old versions to figure out exactly where that bug came in. Version control is one of the most fundamental tools in the professional developer's toolkit. Never develop without version control. It's basically the same as working on a computer where somebody every so often comes along and unplugs it. It is that much risk to develop without version control, because once you start getting into sophisticated programs, you will make changes to your code that break things and you won't know why. It happens to everybody. It happens to the best of us. So you need to be able to get back to old versions so you can make sure everything works. And you need a way of sharing your code with others, and version control is the way to do that. So here we are in our empty directory. If we do an ls-la or dir on Windows, you will see that there's nothing in here except for a .idea directory. If you're using WebStorm, this is created automatically by WebStorm. What we're going to do to get working is we're going to initialize this directory as a Git repository. When you check in files into Git, they are checked into something called a repository, and it is a directory in your folder that has every single change you've ever checked in. The way we create that is by typing git init. So go ahead and do that now. It works exactly the same way on Windows. I'll show you over here. Here we are on my Windows VM. We are in an empty directory. There's nothing in here. If we type git init, it works just like it does on my Mac. And after you type git init, if you look for all files, including hidden files, you will see that there is now a .git directory in your how-to directory. Same thing on Unix. If you just say ls, you won't see anything, but if you say ls-la, which means list in the long form and show all files, you will see the .git and the .idea. That's for WebStorm. Dot, by the way, refers to this directory. Dot refers to or folder, and dot refers to the parent folder. Now that we've initialized Git, we are going to pretty much ignore this .git directory. That's just how Git configures everything. What we need to do now is have something to check in. And to start with, the traditional thing to do with Git is to have the first commit, the first thing you check in, be called initial commit. And typically what I will do is create a README for that initial commit. And in that README, you'll put the name of your project. And I've made this as a markdown file, readme.md. You may be familiar with Markdown. It's available on a lot of different sites. If you're not, don't worry about it. The only thing you need to know is it's basically just like a text file, except that you need to put 2 blank lines between every paragraph for it to format correctly. If you're using WebStorm, there is a Markdown plugin that it will jump up and offer you to install. And if you do, you'll just see you'll have this preview tab added and you'll get syntax highlighting. Off camera, I'll go ahead and fill in more details in the README, stuff for people who are watching the show. Typically, when I'm doing a real project, I won't put a lot in the README to start with. So there's our README. If we list everything here, we can see that it's now available in our directory. There's one more thing we need to do before we create that initial commit, though. We need to tell Git to ignore a few files. If you see that this .idea directory has been added. That is where WebStorm stores all of its information about how the project is configured, what our preferences are, and so forth. Most of this we actually want to share with other people on our team. Remember, what we're doing here is we're creating a reproducible build. We want other people on our team to see the same results in their work as we see on our own machine. And part of what goes along with that is having common conventions like what are the project settings and how do we do spaces versus tabs and so forth. The one piece we don't want everybody to get is this file right here, .idea/workspace.xml. This file changes a whole bunch, and it's very specific to this workstation. And I know this just through trial and error and working with WebStorm before. So we want to tell Git that we aren't going to check in that file. And the way we do that is with a file called .gitignore. So go ahead and go to your how-to tabs and create a .gitignore file. The .gitignore file takes one file name per line, and anything it finds in here, it will just flat out ignore. If you do a search for gitignore syntax, you will come across this page right here, and it will tell you how this works. But basically what you need to know is that to create a comment, you put a hash, and everything else you just write exactly as you want it. So what we're going to do is we're going to say ignore.idea/workspace.xml, and that will ignore that file. Let me show you so you can see this working. Right now, if we say git status, you can see Git will tell us everything that we have not yet checked in. These are untracked files. These are files that Git does not know about. We can see here that Git doesn't know about the .gitignore file, the .idea file, or the readme.md. Now, if we were to tell Git to add these files, which we would do like this, git space add space dot is one way to do it. That basically says add everything starting with the current directory and going through all the directories below the current directory, or all the folders below the current folder. If we do that and then we say git status, you can see it will say these are the files we're about to commit. .gitignore, .idea, and all the files in that .idea directory, including workspace.xml. But remember, we don't want that. So I'm going to do a git reset that says undo the add we just did. So if we do git status again, you can see that now everything is untracked. I'm going to go into our .ignore file, and I'm going to put in a comment saying that we are about to ignore a WebStorm file, and the WebStorm file we're going to ignore is idea.idea/workspace.xml. Save that. Go back to our terminal. And now when we say git add dot and look at what Git understands, you can see that everything is in here except for that .idea/workspace.xml. Now there's another file we want to add for the Macs. On the Mac, if you open a folder in the Finder and do certain things to it, the Mac will create a file called dsstore. So I'm going to add that to our gitignore because we don't want to check that in. It's just Mac OS crap that they add to every single folder or every single directory, which is kind of annoying. Okay, so you can see here when I said git status, when I said git add before, it added all these things, but now I've made a change to .git ignore. Those changes haven't been added to our commit. So I need to say git add dot again. And then now I'm going to check them in by saying git commit all the files that have changed and type in a message, which will be, in our case, initial commit. Whenever you're checking in with Git, you will typically do these three things. You will say git status to see what is going to go in. You say git add dot to check everything, to add all the files that are new to Git, and then git commit space -a, m, and then your message to actually do the commit. Now, Git is a complicated tool. If you're familiar with it, you might disagree with those instructions, but there are lots of ways of doing it. This is the way I tend to prefer. It's just a habit. Now, if you see, when you do your git status, if you see files that are not known by Git that you don't want to add, then you add them to your .git ignore. So there we go. We have now added files to our commit. If we do a status, we can see that nothing is there is nothing to commit. We can use a tool called git k, and we'll use the --all parameter and see what has gone into Git. Git K is a visualizer for Git. It is available on Windows as well. It's not the prettiest tool in the world, but it will show you what you've committed and the files that are in there. So you can see here that our initial commit has our git ignore, our .idea file, and our readme. And over here on the left, you can see that it has been added. All right, that is version control. Again, this is a way of checkpointing your work, and more importantly, for our purposes of creating a reproducible build, it's a way of sharing your files with other people on your team. For more information about Git, check out this lessons learned video right here. To wrap up, here's some exercises for you to try. First off, go ahead and create that README file, create that git ignore, and check it into Git. All right, that is it for this time. Next time, we are going to get started on actually automating our build. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.